Dallas has their new head coach in place, but now Brian Schottenheimer is working to fill out his staff. And while the first-year head coach is planning to call plays for the offense, it'll be interesting to see who he brings in at offensive coordinator. Jeremy Fowler reported this week that the Cowboys are considering an interview with Ken Dorsey for that position. Of course, Dorsey was the OC in Cleveland last year. Year before that, he was in Buffalo. Mina, if Schottenheimer is going to call the plays, we know that at least that'll be handled. With the OC, it's maybe a different role. What do we know, though, about Schottenheimer and what he may do if he's a play caller?
So we don't know a lot about Brian Schottenheimer. I'll start there because he is going to be calling plays. This is going to be his offense. But when people have asked me, what is that offense going to be like? I actually have said, this is an open question. He has not called plays last couple of years. It's been Mike McCarthy. And then when you go back to the last time he did in Seattle, 2020, you guys remember, Russell Wilson was lighting the NFL on fire. And then defenses started playing those too high shells. They couldn't really run the football. Russell turned it over. And then Pete Carroll, the head coach, I believe, who cares a lot about turning the ball over, said, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're running the ball. There was a bit of a push-pull between him, the coach, the quarterback. So as a result, I'm not sure what his identity right now is. And it was really interesting to me in the press conference to hear him talk about some of sort of the modern buzzwords around offense right now in terms of motion and cut splits and all of that, because that might be the direction he has envisioned, and I just don't know what that direction is.
If I was a player in their locker room, I would be very discouraged right now. I really would. Just with the way this offseason has gone, the way last offseason went, the way they handled the situation with Mike McCarthy, hiring Brian Schottenheimer, and now the who's going to be the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. My question, I guess the most important one on my mind is what star asks out? And I know that doesn't happen in Dallas. I know that. But like, what star looks at this situation? Which one of their 5, 6, 7 best players looks at this situation and truly feels like we got a real chance? I just don't. I think who asks out first is going to be the most interesting part for their offseason.
All right, we're going to cut this short for a second because we do have some news. The Jets have an agreement with Tanner Engstrand to be their offensive coordinator, sources confirming. You see this tweet from Rich Cimini. What do you think, Dan?
I do not know who Tanner Engstrand is. Where does he come from? He comes from Detroit.
He comes from Detroit. Yeah. Glenn has a familiarity with him, of course. And the potential risk, as you see in the tweet here, he's never called plays on the NFL level. So another rookie OC.
I mean, I love the fact that he obviously has the history with Ben Johnson, but not having called plays before and how much this might impact Aaron Rodgers going there or not going there, I do think is probably the most interesting thing attached to it.
I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Austin.
It's a weird hire to me, and it's a hire of comfort. I thought Aaron Glenn did a great job in going out and getting Steve Wilks and adding some experience to that staff. I think when Sean McVay took over the Rams, he had Wade Phillips on that side of the football, so you had some of that head coaching pedigree. Aaron Glenn, who I believe won't be involved heavily schematically offensively, I would love a guy who's been there before, who sort of understands what we're going to need to play that complementary football. We need exactly to win. And so I would have liked to have a more experienced guy, Laura. I'm sorry.
I'm just doing some active Googling here as we're looking up Tanner Engstrand.
For 4 years, is that what you have?
Yeah, and he was the passing game coordinator. So their pass game, was great. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Go ahead.
I just think philosophically he can't deviate that far away from Ben Johnson. But it brings me to something that Dan has said in the past. Like, calling plays is not just looking at a sheet. And it's a feel, it's a timing situation, and that's something that we laud a lot of these really good offensive coordinators about, is calling the right plays at the right time and having a feel for how the game is going. That's always interesting to me.
Dan, what I find interesting, if it is Aaron Rodgers, which is the question hanging over everything, what Aaron Rodgers likes to do on offense is diametrically opposed from that under center play action Lions scheme. So this could be like tea leaves that maybe they do not expect the quarterback to come back.
I was just going to say, this makes me think 0% chance Aaron Rodgers is in New York. I mean, because I think that would be really risky as an organization with the new head coach to go, hey, we're going to take one of the most successful quarterbacks in the history of the league and pair him with a guy who likes to do do it one way, and pair him with a guy who's never called plays before in the NFL. He's only been in the NFL for 4 years.
That's really different.
The other piece of it too is understanding Aaron Rodgers is not going to be around for a very long time, and if you're making decisions,
he's going to be alive.
Yeah, alive. But I'm talking about in the league. But if you're making decisions based on what would make him happy right now, you aren't making decisions that allow you to have longevity at the head coaching position.
And
if you're
you
Aaron
remember
Glenn.
I said that's the first thing I would do if I was Aaron Glenn.
You would hire a coach what?
I move
away
from
from
Aaron Rodgers
Yeah.
because you can't. Literally, you living under the umbrella of the old that was already there, regardless of you being named the head coach.
At least
Suggests.
correct.
So then, who would be an answer at quarterback?
I think that's the next. I mean, I highly doubt that it's Sam Darnold. What happens with Geno Smith in Seattle, Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford? But it seems like if he comes back, he's going to go back to LA. The draft obviously becomes a little bit of a forefront for New York.
That's a great question. Obviously, you do it all the time, but you got a lot of organizations right now that should be very honest about this. Going to take a minute.
Yeah.
And they should be very honest about their head coaches, to their fan base. There's I hear this conversation and this dialogue going, and it's our job to figure it out about these quarterbacks. It ain't none.
Right.
It ain't none.
It ain't enough of them.
That's sure. Yeah. So it's like at some point these things will work themselves out, but don't have the expectation that you're about to be like. Let us be shocked that you're a playoff contender at some point. But right now you can't. Yeah, you can't call a name and say, oh yeah, that's a great fit. That's why they got jobs already.
Right.
Yeah. Again, Tanner Engstrand will be the new offensive coordinator in New York. He comes from the Lions, where he was the passing game coordinator.